This is Game On, discussing the biggest games and all the latest sports news with Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Showtime, folks. It's episode 30 of Game On here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. I'm Johnny Montalbano, joined by Hank Indictor. Hank, good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, and I'm feeling good about the Giants being 6-1. And isn't it nice that they're still relevant after yet another failed, disappointing Yankee season comes to a conclusion that, let's be real, I think you and I, and probably anyone who even watches baseball on like a consistent basis, saw the writing on the wall and knew it was coming. But to get swept by the Houston Astros, sorry, I had to.
That was a rough one for sure in so many ways, and we're going to get to it. We're going to get to the entire baseball postseason. We got all the football, the good with the Giants, even with the Jets, the bad, which is really a lot of the league. We're going to get into that. Also, we do have some NBA news that we're going to get to. And before we do get started, I just want to quickly congratulate Danielle and Kevin, who I was up with. I was in New York on Long Island over the weekend and was able to go to their wedding. It was good to be back on Long Island for the weekend and see some old friends who I had not seen in almost 8 years. So that was a fun time over the weekend. We were able to, during the wedding, catch up on the sports and stuff, catch up with everybody. It was a fun weekend up there. So congratulations to them. And we'll see. And I'm looking forward to getting back up there again, seeing everybody real soon. I even saw my old boss at WCWP, Mr. Dan Cox. So if he's watching, shout out to you, Dan. He was a big reason I was able to start doing sports radio 11 years ago and now transferring it over here to the streaming side here with Game On. And that was exciting as well. So just wanted to get that out of the way and say congratulations to them. And, of course, folks, we do want to hear from you during the show here as well, as we certainly have a lot to get to. So follow us across all of our social media platforms. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/GameOnETB. We're on Twitter at GameOnETB. Also, our Instagram account at GameOn_ETB. And you can follow our personal handles there on the bottom of your screen. So, Hank, a lot to get to, as I said. And we obviously have to get it going here with the baseball as our World Series matchup is now set. And unfortunately, it is not going to feature the Yankees. It is going to be the Philadelphia Phillies and the Houston Astros. One team that I don't think we're really surprised is in the Astros, and one team that we're, I think, really surprised about in the Phillies. And that's where we'll start the show with the Phillies, who were able to get past the Padres in an NLCS of two really big surprises. And the Phillies, when we've talked about their season all year long, early on firing Joe Girardi, and a lot of people were questioning that move. And Rob Thompson comes in, and really Philadelphia, when you look at them, really didn't get going until about the last month and a half of the season. Bryce Harper gets injured against the Padres over there in San Diego earlier on, is out about 6 to 8 weeks, and then he comes back, and you look at this team, and it is just amazing what they've been able to do, and they've been able to get some timely hits, get some good pitching to great pitching. They've been able to get some power. That's pretty much how it gets done here. And they're able to get past the Padres in that big game there late in Game 5, that big moment where Harper hits that home run in the 8th inning to give the Phillies the lead and then obviously hold on and win and advance to the World Series. And really an incredible story when you look at where this Philadelphia team was at the start of the year. But I think what it shows you, Hank, is from the Phillies side and even from the Yankees side too, it is a long baseball season. But Phillies going to the World Series.
Yeah, I think definitely it's a surprise for sure. But if you look at the roster on paper, I wouldn't necessarily think of the Phillies as like a true underdog / little engine that could. And let me tell you why. Because you have arguably one of the best catchers in baseball in JT Realmuto, who actually had a pretty historic postseason and is a big reason why we are still discussing the Phillies as we speak. And Bryce Harper, that name needs no introduction. He's arguably one of the best players and one guy you could probably make a case as one of the faces of Major League Baseball. And talk about guys who had a big impact for the Phillies. He finally had his moment where he shined in the postseason. He went like 8 for 16 in the NLCS and had some big home runs. The biggest, of course, being in Game 5 in the bottom of the 8th inning against the San Diego Padres, which probably put the city of Philadelphia into a massive frenzy. Although, if we're really thinking about it, I think his first home run in the series is probably the one that's still landing. But in any event, those are two genuine superstars. And you also have other good bats in this lineup, such as Nick Castellanos, with or without a drive to deep left field. What's his name? Kyle Schwarber, who has proven to be a very big, impactful bat in the lineup. And I was on record, by the way. You can go look back at some of the old videos of review and preview when I did some off-season videos about big moves. I said that this was a really good get for the Phillies, not just so much because of the contract, but because this is a guy who's been proven to be a really good locker room presence. And I'll tell you what, if this is a little side tangent, but if you're a Boston Red Sox fan, how can you not be upset at Chaim Bloom for not going after him when that could have really solved your issues at first base, which was an issue that nobody really talked about that team. But I digress. He's a really good leadoff hitter, guy who gets on base a lot. And also, fun fact, he has the most home runs of anybody not named Aaron Judge in the 2022 season. So with all that in mind, really good lineup. And then you look at the starting pitching staff. You have Zach Wheeler, who some of you might even argue has actually pitched better statistically than Garrett Cole, and look at the contracts. And then you have Aaron Nola, who also came up big in some huge moments. I think this is a team that probably would have won their division if they had played anywhere else. It's really the only reason they weren't even first place is, one, because the New York Mets had a lot of players really performing very well. And then also because the Atlanta Braves, in my opinion, were the best team in the division. They just somehow ran into a Phillies team that you could say got hot at the right time, which is true. But the fact of the matter is, I think while it's good for the city to give the narrative of them being a true underdog, little engine that could team just based off of their win total, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I really think they're more talented than people are giving them credit for. And that's a big reason as to why, like I said, we're still having them this conversation. Now, if there's really any one flaw in the Phillies, it's probably their bullpen. But for the most part, they've been doing a pretty good lockdown job during the postseason.
There were two concerns with me with the Phillies all season long and into the postseason. And one of them was that bullpen, and actually has pitched pretty well for the most part. And number two has been their defense, and their defense has not been bad. I mean, it's been good enough to help them win games, but you look at this whole team, and not only is it the power, not only is it the big guys in the lineup, but it's even all the little guys too, like the Gene Seguras of the world,
Yep.
And they're getting timely hits. I go back to the series against the Cardinals when they scored 6 in the 9th inning off the Cardinals bullpen, and it just seems like they've never stopped. And you see that with a lot of teams in sports in general over these last several years. If they get hot at the right time and everything starts clicking, then you can get it into the postseason and have a chance. And that's what they've been able to do. And it's incredible to watch. And, for the city of Philadelphia, which right now you look at their sports teams, I mean, you've got the Eagles, who are one of the best teams in the NFL through 7 weeks. You've got, the 76ers, who are expected to be right up there in the Eastern Conference this year. Even the Flyers, who might have a chance in the NHL.
Like I told you, John Tortorella was actually a hire that I thought made sense. And as I said, you and I have lived it.
Yep, absolutely. And now we'll see what this Phillies team does. And I know we'll get to previewing here the World Series in just a few minutes. But, it's just absolutely incredible. And that home run that Harper hit in the 8th inning was just unbelievable. And you actually, I have to say, you actually feel good for Harper, because there's always been – I even know with us here on the podcast network, on the Empty the Bench podcast network, we were having a discussion and debate about who you take on your team, Mike Trout or Bryce Harper. I mean, now I will probably disagree with everybody, and I'll still take Mike Trout. But Bryce Harper's teams – see, the thing is, I think Mike Trout's the better player, not to take anything away from Harper, but Harper's teams have been better, and that's where it actually helps. It elevates as well when you have a great player like Harper too, and you have a great team around him. That also helps too. And we'll see what this Phillies team does going into the World Series and this long layoff that both the Phillies and the Astros are going to have, because now Game 1 of the World Series is not until Friday, so both teams are going to have just about the same amount of time off. As you saw the Astros win on Game 4 on Saturday, and we'll get to the Astros right now, who swept the Yankees in 4. And Hank, we spoke about it before. One of the I didn't really have a concern early part of this series because the Astros were rested. The Yankees had a very quick turnaround from their division series win against the Guardians to go against the Astros and face Justin Verlander, and they actually had their chances early on in the series. But the Astros are just too good. We knew about that too. And there's just a lot of things that happen that annoy you that at the same time, though, you understand. But Hank, you and I spoke about this off air. I think we understand the outcome. We kind of expect this, but we're still very frustrated because there's a lot of things that you did not like in this series. But I know you were eager to go at this when I was at LaGuardia Airport on Monday. What is your whole thoughts about this whole series and the Yankees as general here? Is they now have a very important offseason upcoming?
To me, it pretty much shows you the difference between a well-run organization and one that is behind on the times. Now, you can argue with me and point out the record of the Yankees all you want, but listen, here is the straight, cold, hard fact. Every single year the Yankees have gone to the postseason since 2017, it has always been the same. The big hitters rely on the home runs, and they cannot get the clutch hit when it matters most. And, oftentimes we worry about the starting pitching saying, oh, is it going to be able to carry them to a deep enough run? Can it help us get through the postseason? More often than not, with the possible exception of Game 3 of the 2018 ALDS, which I had the unfortunate mispleasure of being at, and I'd like to try to block that game out of my memory as much as possible. The pitching never really was the problem with the Yankees, and maybe you could argue certain moments in the 2019 ALCS where the pitching wasn't great. It just had I do recall there was one game where they had one bad inningitis, but the offense obviously could not make up for it. This year, again, more of the same thing. And look, if you want to tell me that Aaron Judge should be shamed and is a big reason as to why the Yankees lost the series, I'm not necessarily going to argue with that, because if you look at those numbers, they have been absolutely abysmal. What I will tell you is that, look at the rest of the lineup. Name me one guy in that lineup during this postseason that hit over 300. Go ahead. I'll wait. Take your time. Play the Jeopardy theme while we're at it.
It wasn't many.
0.
That's what I mean.
And let me put it this way. Johnny, I am not going to disagree with your takes that having DJ LeMahieu and Andrew Benintendi healthy would have probably been different. I mean, whether the Yankees would have lost that series with those guys, would have won or lost the series with those guys, is neither here nor there, in my opinion. What is the issue is that you have guys being like Marwin Gonzalez, Matt Carpenter, who literally had not had any big reps up until the playoffs, and washed up Josh Donaldson getting key at bats in certain situation. It all goes back to what I've been saying all along, and it starts at the top. Brian Cashman was a good general manager for the Yankees, but the key word that I've been saying and have been saying for so long is was. He is probably the person that is most responsible for why we're sitting here and having this New York Yankees postmortem discussion as we speak right now, because he just he was never able to get a first-rate pitcher that probably could have helped beefed up that rotation. Now, again, like I said, the offense is just as much of the problem too. You can't really fault him for Andrew Benintendi. That was just rotten luck. But if you look at like how the Yankees just have been philosophically over the years, it's just been like relying on the home run, thinking that they can out-homer their way to victories every time, which you can get away with that in regular season games against, like, say, the Kansas City Royals, the Tampa Bay Rays, or how about the 2022 version of the Boston Red Sox, who did not have a pitching staff that could really succeed against the Yankees on any given night. You can do well against those teams. But when you go up against a real team like the Houston Astros, who, make no mistake, have used analytics, and that's why I hate when people tell me, oh, analytics has been killing the Yankees and it's been ruining the game. No, that's never been the problem. The problem is that the Yankees, unlike the Astros, have failed to keep up with the times, and the Astros are able to build a good, fundamentally sound team, and they have pretty much a factory of prospects with, like, when it comes to minor leaguers. I mean, you lose Carlos Correa, not a problem. You've got Jeremy Pena, and look what he did. Won the ALCS MVP. That's just one example. You'll have Yordan Alvarez comes up, and he becomes one of your most feared hitters in their lineup. And having guys like them, Chas McCormick, Kyle Tucker, it makes the fact that Jose Altuve and some other guys under two other members of the Astros lineup underperform not hurt at all. So that is the big difference. And then they've also built a deep starting pitching and a deep rotation. And you look at the Yankees, again, as I said about Aaron Judge, if you want to shame him for not getting the big hits in the ALCS, that's fine. But you also have to acknowledge that the Yankees don't go this far without the 62 home run season of 99. And it's a big reason why he should be the MVP. But again, that's a tangent that we've already discussed ad nauseum many a time. The Yankees are just behind on the times philosophically. They don't seem to value getting up, get them in, get them over. They don't have the mix of grinders as well as the superstars. And that was what helped them in the late 90s. And do you want to know another thing that's really different about the Yankees and the Astros?
Sure.
Look at their front office. The latest person that's working in the Yankees front office that has been hired by the team was 2007. The earliest person to have been hired by the Astros in their front office was 2015. Now, granted, I know a lot of the turnover has to do with the cheating scandals and whatnot, but at the end of the day, that the cheating scandal never hurt them because the Astros are a fundamentally sound and well-built organization that hires the right people. Even when they had to let their GM go, they still got another guy who was really smart and knew what it took to win a GM. And they still found a way to get a good clubhouse presence in Dusty Baker, who, if the Astros win the World Series, I'll be extremely happy for because he has been in the game for a long time. So many people say he's one of the nicest personalities in baseball. And with or without this World Series title, he's going to be a Hall of Famer anyways. But it would just be nice for him to finally have that resume that's been really missing in a long and illustrious managing career. And fun fact, Dusty Baker is actually the only manager to have won a division with 5 different teams. He did it twice with the Giants, once with the Cubs. I believe he did it twice with the Reds, once with the Nationals, and now with the Astros, he's done it pretty much every year, every 162-game regular season in baseball.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what I have to say. And by the way, I want to give you one more take.
Sure.
I was at Game 3 of the ALCS, and as I mentioned, I was also at Game 3 of the 2018 ALDS against the Boston Red Sox. This year was worse. Now, why would I say that when I just compared that to a 16-1 loss to the Red Sox? Because in this one, it was a lower scoring game, and when it was 2-0, it felt like 20-0, but yet every time the Yankees somehow were lucky enough to get a base runner, you just had false hope. And it really dragged out up until Aaron Boone finally pulled Garrett Cole when probably he should have left him keep going. But the fact that wasn't really the issue. The problem was you put in Clark Schmidt instead of using Clay Holmes, who hadn't even pitched at all at that point in the series, and some of your other high leverage guys. It's just, it was just so bad. It was one of the worst Yankee games I'd ever attended. And by the way, one more thing I got to say before I turn it back over to you. And I'm sorry that I've been going.
No, you're good. You were at the games. I I was there in New York over the weekend.
I
I
am
watching
just
it, and I had some
so
issues.
frustrated. If you want to say that Aaron Boone did a terrible job managing during the postseason, you're not going to get any complaint or disagreement from me. I wholeheartedly agree with that take. But if you're going to say that he's the main reason in lost, then that would be like telling me that the engineer was the main reason that a plane crashed. Because essentially, Aaron Boone may have had a hand in that series, but he wasn't the main reason why they lost. A lot of things happened, stuff that was probably in and out of his control. But at the end of the day, it starts from the top. But hey, don't worry. I'm just going to be wasting my breath here because nothing is going to be changing. Hal seems to love Brian Cashman way too much. He's going to let him stay for another year, and then he's going to scapegoat Aaron Boone, and then they're going to bring in a manager who's just going to be a lapdog to Brian Cashman, and we're going to be dealing this every single year, and it just, I just wonder when this is going to change. I'm absolutely sick of this.
All right. I got a lot to say here.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. No, I'm actually by that graphic right there. Good old Brian Cashman. I don't know if I can go to that extreme.
I don't know if I will, because like I said, at least Brian Cashman has made some good moves, and at one point he was a good GM. But like I said, he is an example of the fact that the Yankees are behind the times and haven't been able to adapt to analytics.
So I'm going to get to the Yankees offseason needs and plans here in a couple of seconds here, but I want to talk about this series first and foremost, because I look at this series in general. It comes down to just some basic things. The Astros outpitched the Yanks. They played better defense than the Yanks, and they got more timely hits than the Yanks. And that's really what it is. Because if you look at the series, if you would have told me before the series started, the Yanks would have kept Jose Altuve, Yordan Alvarez, and Kyle Tucker in check, I thought we would have had a chance. But you look at it, it was the Jeremy Peñas of the world. You know, Alex Bregman and Yuri Gurriel are pretty good players, and they've been there like Altuve has for the longest time. But
essentially what those guys were like some of the lesser known, like non-superstars that contributed to the late 90s Yankees run is what I'd compare them to.
Yeah, I mean Bregman's still very good. I mean when he's healthy and stuff. I mean he had a great year this year. But Jeremy Peña, like you had said, they lose Correa and they don't miss a beat there at shortstop. And Peña had a great series, but it was Peña, it was Bregman, it was Gurriel, it was even Chas McCormick who had 2 home runs in the 4 games. But like the combination of Alvarez, Altuve, and Tucker had 1 RBI, and they went 8 for 43 in the series. If you would have told me that those 3 would have went 8 for 43, I would have told you the Yanks would have had a chance. But what it comes down to is Justin Verlander pitched great in game 1. Game 2, they don't get the timely hits. And really, when you look at it, game 3 comes down to 2 things. That fly ball that's not caught that leads to the 2-run home run, and the fact that you had men on base and you couldn't get a job. And even in game 4, Hank, I'm watching this game at a bar with the wedding party, and the Yanks are up 3-0, and they have men on base still, and I'm like, this is not enough. They've got to add on to this. And the next thing you know, boom, 3-run home run by Peña ties the game up, and the double play that's not turned later on. And that's what it comes down to. Some of Boone's decision making in this postseason is questionable, but it's not ultimately why the Yankees lost the series. But
correct.
I mean, look, I didn't love going to Clark Schmidt in the 9th inning of Game 3 against the Guardians, and the Yanks were able to overcome that, win 2 games in advance on. I did not like taking Garrett Cole I did not like taking Garrett Cole out of the situation that he did. And if they did, and you wanted to take Cole out of the situation, that's fine, but you can't be going to Lou Trevino in that spot. The guy's the person in that spot, and I get that it was only the 6th.
And you're down 2-0. You know damn well that a loss is going to put you in danger because it's your first home loss. How do you not show that sense of urgency? Like that's basically, to me, that's situational unawareness.
See, the guy, honestly, and I know they don't do this. Actually, Buck Showalter with the Mets does it. The guy in that spot to me was Holmes. And you know what? If you tell me, but Johnny, what are we going to do to close the game? I worry about that at that point. I mean, I don't go to Clark Schmidt in the 9th inning.
Doesn't matter. It's an emergency.
Yeah, and truth be told, though, even if they put Holmes in that spot, the Yankees were not going to win that game anyway because they just don't.
No.
They got one hit. Think about the fact that you had 2 starts, regular season and postseason, from Christian Javier at Yankee Stadium, and you got 1 hit off of him in 2 starts.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it just comes down to that because, like I said, the big guys. It wasn't the big guys doing it for the Astros. It was the McCormicks, the Peñas of the world that hurt you, and of course the pitching staff. I mean, that bullpen for the Astros is absolutely electric. That starting pitching staff is great too. And even when you got to McCullers in Game 4, you only score 3 runs and in that spot, and then Nestor Cortez, who even in the first couple of innings just did not look right, and then we find out that he actually did have a groin injury that he's been pitching with at the postseason. That it's just problematic. So yeah, the Astros are just light years away. You know what? They draft their own guys. They get the signings that they do make coming through clutch, but a lot of it's also their homegrown talent. The Yankees right now, you look at their staff, and they don't really have a lot of homegrown talent outside of Judge, and that's why I think now the argument can be made. Well, Johnny, look at the Phillies staff. The Phillies are not really a homegrown team. I understand that, but I think the Yankees do need to go in a different direction here, and that's where we'll transition to talking about the Yankees' offseason needs, because I actually think that they were trying to go at a different direction this season in terms of the philosophy of the lineup and stuff. And unfortunately, the 2 guys that I think they were trying to do that with were hurt. Mm-hmm. And it's just, you're not going to use injuries as an excuse, but at the same time, you have to be honest. Not having DJ LeMahieu, who's a contact guy, when he's healthy, has been probably the best hitter on the Yankees, but he has not really been healthy now for the better part of 2 years. Andrew Benintendi, having that contact lefty guy, hurts because who else are you going to stick out there? You're going to have to either put Stanton out in the outfield, and I know Stanton had a good postseason. I really don't want to bash him because he shouldn't be bashed, but the fact that he's on this team actually does hurt because he hurts them in so many different ways. Whether it's, lineup flexibility, defensive flexibility, roster flexibility, he hurts them in a lot of ways. That's why I said that I think at the end of last year, despite the fact that he had a limited no trade clause, I think the Yankees had to move on from him. But not having those 2 guys there and then getting rid of, and I know every Yankee fan was so excited to get rid of Gary Sanchez. Well, and I warned the Yankee fans about this at the start of the season. Be careful what you wish for because you brought in somebody and you want to say that the Royvert's going to be
I will,
right.
by the way, own up for that, Johnny, just for the record, because I know we talked about it, and I was one of those people that was okay with making that trade. But then again, let's not act like I didn't say that it was that taking Josh Donaldson's contract was essentially considered what I like to call the Gary Sanchez tax.
Yeah.
By the way, are you ready for this fun fact?
Yeah.
Josh Donaldson's slugging percentage this postseason was worse than Brett Gardner's final season as a Yankee.
Just so many things, though, with Donaldson. It's just
I can't with this team. I really can't. They've broken me, man. What can I say?
I know, but everybody who was so excited to get rid of Sanchez realizes that they also got rid of a very good player in Gio Urshela. And what I'm not saying he was a superstar, but what he was a great defensive player who got on base, got hits, and was able to spark something. And instead, what you got was a 36-year-old guy who can't play defense, can't get on base, doesn't drive guys in, has the most amount of home runs that he thinks are home runs that are actually not home runs. It's just incredible. And now you've got to find a way. I mean, you're stuck with that $23 million next year. And if money is going to be a thing for the Yankees, and let's be honest, everybody wants to talk about the fact that they've got to, spend. The Yankees don't do that anymore. They have done it. They've done that with Cole. They've done that by taking Stanton's contract. They did that with taking Donaldson's contract. But I don't know if they're going to spend. If you think about it now, I think Rizzo's going to opt out, and I think he's gone. I think that I'm really concerned that Judge is not coming back. I really am. But I think the philosophy of this team is going to have to change. And what I mean by that is you can't have a superstar at every single position. And I think Rizzo's opting out. I think he's gone. So that's a big deal because Rizzo was one of your better players this year. Judge
Not to mention, he was essentially a Keith Hernandez at first base.
He saves them so many errors defensively, Hank. That is why this is going to be a huge loss. That's why I think the Yanks right now are going to have to go in a whole different direction in terms of the makings of their lineup. I like Benintendi. I like LeMahieu. I think LeMahieu, right now, I think LeMahieu is your first baseman going into next year. And maybe you're also talking about, if you want to change up the team, maybe Gleyber Torres has to be dealt to get somebody in here.
I don't think that's a bad idea. In fact, I think you could maybe make the case, and this is probably a hindsight take, that like you could have dealt him like maybe sooner when he had that breakout season, because you probably would have had so many other infielders available at your disposal. But what am I?
Well, I think they were trying to go with that young team with Torres, maybe keeping LeMahieu over first, and then the whole shortstop position. I know that there are shortstops out there. It seems like it's last all season all over again. There's Correa opted out. He's going to be a free agent again. Xander Bogaerts is a free agent over there at short. But I still ultimately think that either Cabrera, Peraza, or Anthony Volpe is going to be the starting shortstop on the Yankees in 2023. And Donaldson, I don't want him, but I don't know of anybody that's going to take that contract. I don't know what kind of value he has. So I think by default right now he's there. Outfield, Benintendi, Bader, who, let's be honest, Harrison Bader saved the Yankees from being eliminated even earlier because he had a great postseason with the bat. But you've got him, and then the big question marks is in right field. Is Judge coming back? Is it going to be Stanton? Is it going to be somebody else? That's what you have. And then catching wise, you've got either Trevino, Higashioka, or even Roybert, who they got in that trade before the season started there. And then your rotation. That's really what Yanks have a lot of question marks now going. And the other big question mark before we even talk about Judge or any of these other guys is Brian Cashman and Aaron Boone.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you right now, if they don't re-sign Judge and he goes out to, let's say, San Francisco, dare I say the Dodgers, dare I say the Mets, or anywhere else, it's going to get really ugly in Yankee Town.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And as I said, going back to that comparison, you can, at this point, the Astros are in the territory of what the old Patriots used to be. You can hate them all you want and disagree with how they went about their success and tell me that their titles are tainted. But the fact of the matter is, the unfortunate truth is, at the end of the day, it's still a World Series championship. The MLB still recognizes it, regardless of what Rob Manfred says and about that whole piece of 10.
Yep.
And not to mention, they have since won, 3 pennants. And regardless of what happens, 4 pennants in a 6-year stretch is still extremely impressive. Do you know how many other teams have done that in that span?
4 and 6?
Not named the Yankees.
Well, the Braves, I don't think the Braves did even in their run in the 90s. The Dodgers have been...
Yeah, no, the Braves. That's pretty much about it.
All right, so the Braves...
92, 95, and 96.
That's right, yeah, 91, 92, 95, 96. The Dodgers have, in this most recent run have been to 3.
Yep.
And so it was not them. So I think it was just the Braves.
Yeah, then I think the Braves are the only one. Actually, no, I take that back. Since divisional play, there is one other team. The Big Red Machine of the 70s.
Big Red Machine, yep. I was going to say probably the Reds.
Yeah. No, that's wrong. I was off by year. 70, 72, 75, and 76. That's 1 year off.
Okay. And the Dodgers back in
the Big Red Machine were pretty close.
And the Dodgers, what about the Dodgers? 77, 78, 81.
Nope, not enough.
That was 3. Okay.
Nope,
yep.
Not enough. Because 83, they lost the NLCS to the Phillies.
That's right. Okay.
Ironically.
Yeah. But that just goes to show you, and the report from Mark Feinstein that came out about the Yanks, with Aaron Judge, that Mookie Betts is open to going back to second base, which is his original position, if they want to go out there and sign Judge. So don't count out the Dodgers. Look, Judge can talk all he wants about how he wants to be a Yankee, but we all know that money talks, and there's going to be somebody that's going to go out there and give him a huge deal.
And at the end of the day, this is going to be an unpopular opinion. I'm not going to shame Aaron Judge at all if he wants to leave the Yankees. He has done so much for this team in what's been 6-7 years at this point.
Yeah, he came up he came up late in 16, and then he had 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So 6 plus years.
He had a great prime, and basically, if we think about it, he's kind of the Don Mattingly of our generation in this sense, that he's been on had chances, but he just could never make it to the World Series. The only difference is Don Mattingly actually only made one postseason. He played a time where there was no such thing as a wild card, and Aaron Judge actually. The other difference is Aaron Judge actually won division titles. Don Mattingly's only playoff appearance was a wild card.
That's right, in 95.
And he got 94 taken away from him because of the strike.
The strike, yeah. But we'll see. This is going to be a very, very interesting Yankee offseason because I think this is going to determine they might, as I said, if I'm the Yankees, I need to change the way this team is, the philosophy of this team. Whether it's been, it's not about spending the money. It's about spending it wisely and getting a team together instead of either all these all-stars, which that hasn't worked either, or, having trying to get power at all these bases. I think first and foremost, you need guys to get on base, and then you have guys that drive them in. Because that's where the LeMahieu's and the Benintendi's of the world hurt. And I'm not saying that the Yanks would have even won, and Hank, you said it too. I'm not saying the Yanks would have won this series against the Astros, but it would have been a more competitive series if those guys were there. And those guys are not there. And what that also does is, too, you don't have a leadoff hitter. Bader, I know, had a good postseason. He's not a leadoff hitter. Gleyber Torres is not a leadoff hitter. Ideally, Aaron Judge is not a leadoff hitter. I get why they were doing that during the season, but your leadoff hitters on this team are Benintendi and LeMahieu. That's it. There's nobody else. Not catcher, not Rizzo. As much as you want to put Rizzo at the leadoff too because he gets on base, he's not a leadoff hitter. Not Torres, not any combination at short, not Donaldson, not Bader, not Stanton, nobody except LeMahieu and Benintendi, and they were not there. And they're only getting older too. LeMahieu's only getting another year older, and he's had 2 years now where he's been hurt a lot, and him not being there is a big, big deal for this Yankee team. So big question marks for them going into the offseason. And we'll find out what happens with them. But we do have a World Series to look forward to, even though it does not get underway until Friday, between the Phillies and the Astros. And, Hank, I'd love to see this Phillies team continue the run. But here's what it comes down to. If you're the Phillies, you have to – I'm not even saying win one. You need to win both of these games in Houston and go back to Citizens Bank Park up 2-0. And if you need your top two starters – in Wheeler and Nola to continue to pitch lights out because there's no room for error against this Houston Astros team. But the good thing, what I like about this series, even though it's, days away, is I do like the fact that they're both evenly getting just about the same amount of rest time going into this series. So the excuse of rust can't be used because both teams are going to be off for a decent amount of time here before this World Series starts. But to me, for the Phillies to have a chance, they need to take both games in Houston to start, get great starts from Nola and Wheeler, and continue the way they've been doing this. Timely hits, but also power. You were talking about the Yankees relying too much on power, but Phillies rely on power, but they do it the right way too. They get it timely. But I think that's the way the Phillies can win. Otherwise, I just think there's just too much on this Astros team. The fact that Houston could get here, and Altuve's been quiet this postseason, Tucker hasn't really done much. Yordan Alvarez, I know, had a good series against Seattle, but he didn't do much against the Yankees, and they still are able to get to this point. It's scary because eventually those guys will get some hits and get on base and do some damage.
So let me get back to the whole underdog Cinderella story aspect for the Phillies. Now, even though I stand by what I said and why I feel like that term is kind of overblown for the Phillies just because of the stars on their roster, I do think it could help them because they're going to be coming into the World Series with this mindset. And Johnny, I don't know if you remember the show Arthur from when we were kids, but
oh, of course.
Remember that moment when DW went up to the sign on Arthur's door and she's like, What does that say? I don't know. Well, this sign can't bother me because I can't read. That's going to be the Phillies with like everyone telling them, oh, you're not supposed to be able to beat this Astros team.
Wow, Hank, I feel young again.
That show was pretty much like one of my favorites, like way back.
Oh, it's a great show to grow up on. They've got rid of a lot of those shows. Yeah, no, that's a great way of looking at it. But this series? That's the only way I can give the Phillies a chance. Now, can they do it? Of course. I mean, anything's possible. But there's just too much on this Astros team. I think it could go 6, but I just think there's still too much on Houston's side.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, as much as I'm sure you and I probably would love to see the Phillies like finish the job, and I can't even believe I'm actually saying I'm okay with the Philadelphia team winning a championship.
Well, that's the other thing too. Am I really comfortable in saying that?
Like at the end of the day, I think despite the star power that they do have, it's not enough to take down Houston. I just think they have been a team on a mission all year long. There's never really been a doubt in my mind that they were the absolute powerhouse and the best team in baseball. And ultimately, I think it is going to be a bit of a longer series because I think the Phillies are, like, again, scrappier than like people thought. I mean, that's been proven with them beating the Atlanta Braves, who I thought was going to be the team playing the Houston Astros in the World Series. I thought it was going to be a rematch. And then we saw what they did to the Padres. I think the Phillies definitely can make things interesting, but ultimately the Astros are just way too deep with starting pitching. And if there's a close game going into extra innings, I think I know whose bullpen I'm trusting, and it's the Astros.
Yeah, the Phillies, I think, will take a game or two, but ultimately, at the end of the day, the Astros are just too good. I'm going to take Houston to win this one in. I'm gonna give the Phillies a game at Houston at Minute Maid, and I'm gonna give them a game at Citizens Bank. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think Houston wins this one in 6.
Okay, yeah. So you and I are pretty much in agreement right there, and I think this might be a series where you finally start to see some big hits from guys like Altuve and Alvarez. So again, really interesting, but I think you also brought up an excellent point. The Astros the Phillies can ill afford to lose the games that Wheeler and Nola start. So to alter an old baseball line from the 40s about the Boston Braves starting rotation, it's Nola and Wheeler and pray for rain, which you can't do because the Astros play in a retractable roof stadium.
Yeah.
Which the Yankees somehow had a bit of a problem with, but there's a reason I didn't really want to address that, and I thought it was pretty stupid.
So we both are going to take the Astros to win the World Series this year, but we'll see what happens as both teams have plenty of days off to prepare for this. And again, that's what's going to make the series fun because they're both going to have pretty much equal time getting ready for this World Series, which does get going on Friday. But Hank, we do have a lot of football to discuss as well. And we come off really a crazy. Oh, you know what? Before I even get to the football, I forgot to even put this in our notes, but I want to also get your thoughts on this real quick. One of the big baseball stories also this past week was Bruce Bochy being named manager of the Texas Rangers. And the only reason why I actually think this is kind of interesting, well, because Bruce Bochy obviously has been retired for a couple of years now, but I forget if it was you or one of the guys over on ETB was talking about Jacob deGrom with the Mets. If he opts out, he thinks the Rangers could be in play for deGrom. And I kind of wonder now, with Bochy bringing his championship experience to a team like the Rangers, who have been in the market for signed some big name players, some big time contracts over these last couple of years. Bochy now being named manager of the Rangers. Now, what do you think that does to the Rangers here going into the offseason and into next year?
I actually think that's a decent hire for the Texas Rangers, if I'm being honest, because as has been proven this year, you don't necessarily need a young manager that doesn't necessarily know how to have a really good feel for the game and is going to be heavily relying on analytics. I think it helps that you have a manager who maybe can be able to adjust with times. Now, granted, will Bruce Bochy be using the analytics? I don't know. He might be willing to let it help him, but he also has the type of personality to where you need somebody who's kind of has that old school background. And as I said, he's a proven winner, and everyone on the Giants really seemed to love playing for him when he was managing there for 15 years. And look, and I'll tell you another thing too. He hasn't been out as baseball for as long as, say, a Tony La Russa. So I don't think that hire can really be even worse. And another thing to keep in mind with the Texas Rangers, you have some talented names on that roster like a Corey Seager and a Marcus Semien, who I thought, they kind of splurged a bit with those signings. But let's also not forget, you have a really deep minor league system. I mean, Jack Leiter and Kumar Rocker are among some really good pitchers that could very well be the future for them if they pan out. So they seem to be like starting fresh with like a new set of management and like new and a better roster. Like, I think it's a good hire.
Yeah, I agree. And you've seen the last couple of years, or even this
Now,
postseason.
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off for one
That's
second.
okay.
Do I think they have enough to necessarily challenge the Astros? Probably not yet, and it may be a while. I still think the Astros are going to be a thorn in their side for years to come. But I like the way they're going about trying to improve and change their culture.
Well, I also look at that division for a second. I know Seattle's still going to be pretty good. You expect them to still be up there, but the Angels just don't seem to be getting off the ground. And the talks about Shohei Ohtani possibly leaving are in play there. And the Angels just might be a team that just cannot get off the ground. And now what Bochy brings, I think
And
what
the A's are essentially like a lame duck franchise.
And the A's too, yeah. And I mean, the only guarantee I can make with Oakland is that the fact that they're going to not be there in a couple of years. But as far as with Bochy, I think what the Rangers are trying to do is they're trying to, no pun intended, hit a home run like what's been going on these last couple of years. You've seen, like the La Russa's come back. You've seen Buck Showalter with the Mets, what Showalter was able to do to the Mets, and they were able to win 101 games this year. You look at this postseason, you've had guys like Terry Francona, in this World Series, Dusty Baker. So like the old school non-analytical managers actually still have success, even though in this day of age, unfortunately, of analytical baseball. But I think the Rangers are trying to get one here with Bochy, and I would not be surprised if the Rangers continue this offseason and try and make some big-time moves. I think they are certainly a name to be discussed as far as the Jacob deGrom possibility if he does indeed opt out from the Mets, and maybe them go at some other big-time players. Now, I'm not going to say that they're in the play for Aaron Judge here, but they could be making some other moves here to go along with these young players. And, yeah, their minor league system is very, very good. So look at the Rangers to be a team that might be on the making a push here in these next couple of seasons. And I think Bochy is going to bring that experience to a Texas team that had a disappointing last couple of years and fired Woodward earlier on this year. So a good signing there and a notable one for the Texas Rangers.
That's a major upgrade if we're talking about managers.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I think they're trying. You've been seeing this the last couple of years, and we'll see if it works here for the Rangers. Now let's get to the football. And before we get into the Week 7 recap, I want to spend a couple of seconds here on a big trade that happened this past week where the San Francisco 49ers, really a late night move Thursday night, acquired Christian McCaffrey from the Carolina Panthers for draft picks. And it's, the Christian McCaffrey rumors have been out there. The 49ers, though, were not a team that I was thinking that was going to make a play for him. But I love this move for San Francisco because now all of a sudden now you've got, with Elijah Mitchell being out, he provides you some great running back. There's no doubt about it. When McCaffrey's out there and he's healthy, he is a dynamic running back. His issue has obviously been health these last couple of years, but I think he's going to fit well into that system in San Francisco where they're not really a run-heavy team now, especially with Jimmy Garoppolo there under center, but he definitely adds another weapon of offense. And now the 49ers, if they're fully together and Garoppolo's playing like he's been playing recently, then I think the 49ers can definitely be a team that can challenge right up there.
I think the Niners, this is a very risky trade for the Niners. And Johnny, you're probably going to be disagreeing with me here, but I would say that I think the Carolina Panthers kind of got the better end of that trade because 4 draft picks, I don't care what round they're in, are a lot to get rid of if you're trying to go for a running back who, make no mistake, he's absolutely talented and fantastic, but he's also somebody who has been having trouble staying healthy. And I just feel like this is a move that really reeks of desperation for the 49ers. And look, there's one way that this trade could have really been avoided. You could have traded that pick down that you had in 2016, the one that the Bears gifted you for Mitch Trubisky, or one of the ones that you got gifted from the Bears, and then used it on, maybe traded it down, used it on him instead of taking Solomon Thomas, who really turned out to be a pretty big bust.
Well, so it's funny you say that because Warren Sharp had a very good tweet.
And don't get me wrong, they've made some great moves. Like Shanahan and Lynch have definitely done a good job building the roster, but I think they also could have done better over the years.
It is kind of desperate when you look at their history for running backs. So since 2020, right, and I think you were going along with this, the 49ers have used a third-round pick to draft a running back in 2021, a third-rounder to draft one in 2022, a sixth-round one in 2021 for a running back, and now they traded a second-round pick, a second, third, and fourth pick in the 2023 draft, and a fifth in the 2024 for the running back position. And running backs are always risky. We've spoken about that with Barkley. We've said that even with Jonathan Taylor over there in Indy. But I think the 49ers see a window here to go for it. And the NFC, I came into the season thinking that it was not that deep. I still don't think it's that deep. And especially nowadays, and we're going to get to that with the games here, when you have a Bucs team that's struggling, a Packers team that's struggling. It's really, when you look at the NFC right now, it is the Eagles. I'll put the Cowboys back in there. I know the Giants are right there at 6-1, and the Vikings. And in that West, is Seattle really going to keep this going? I think the 49ers see, even if it might take a little bit of time, I think they do see a possibility here that McCaffrey does provide another offensive weapon for the Niners.
Yeah, no, I think it'll definitely be interesting to see how it works out. But again, I think even though the Niners have the potential and are still very much capable of making a deep run, I just think in the long run, this is going to really come back to haunt them. And like I said, I feel like sometimes when you correct a mistake that you really could have had years ago, those moves historically don't always work.
No, that is true too. But I do think it's desperation for 49ers, but I think it's also a move they see here with this NFC, how strong it really is, and how it doesn't look that strong. I think they do see a shot to go for it here too. And just one other thing here from the Panthers side of things, for the GM Scott Fitterer to say that this isn't a situation where we're trying to sell when we've traded Christian McCaffrey and you traded away Robbie Anderson. I mean, that's a little much. I mean, I know DJ Moore's still there. I know they've been getting calls about defensive end Brett Burns, and that they turned down reportedly multiple first-round picks for Burns. But, I mean, come on. You can't tell me now. You want to say you look at that NFC South, which is what the AFC South was, and you think you might have an outside shot to go for it. Okay, but I mean, you can't tell me you're selling, but you trade away McCaffrey, who was a fan favorite. I mean, they were Carolina fans getting emotional on Friday because of the trade. So I think that's a little bit of a reach, but we'll see though, because it is
the Panthers, though, if we're being honest, that they're an absolute mess. They needed to clean house and just nuke things in the organization.
Well, I mean, there are other guys on the team that are tradable, and we'll find out the trade deadline for the NFL is on Tuesday the 1st, and we'll find out if there are going to be some other other moves made between now and then. I know there were two other ones. One that happened Monday night, one that happened on Tuesday that we'll touch on in just a few minutes here. But just going through the Week 7 slate, and Hank, I tell you, when we go through these games, this is what I mean. We're 7 weeks into the NFL season, and I can't figure this league out for the life of me. I can't figure out with our picks. I can't figure out when we try and recap these games, because when you look at it, it's just I got really more confusion than out of anything. Like the Cardinals putting up 42 points against the Saints. Didn't see that happening Thursday nights.
I mean, this is what the NFL is, though. It's tricks and confusion.
It sure is, and it's been both of that. I know where Hank's going with that, by the way. But yeah, I know the Cardinals did get Robbie Anderson, and they got DeAndre Hopkins back. Really, that game, though, came down to not one, but 2 pick sixes, both on consecutive possessions from Andy Dalton. It's good to see that Andy Dalton channeled his inner Jameis Winston and his inner primetime Kirk Cousins in that one. But even with the Saints, the Saints put up points, but their defense these last couple of weeks, not great. But the Cardinals get past the Saints 42-34. The Ravens get past the Browns 23-20 in another close game that Cleveland comes out on the losing side of. And then this is where the confusion comes in. Those aforementioned Panthers, who were 13-point underdogs to Tom Brady's Bucs, not only beat the Bucs but absolutely destroyed them 21-3. And maybe you could have seen it coming when Mike Evans on that opening drive for the Bucs drops a wide, not only a wide open, but I mean wide open touchdown pass. I mean, he had so much separation between him and his next receiver, and he drops that, and it was just all downhill for the Bucs, who have now lost 4 out of 5 and really could have even lost that 5th game if you think about it. But there are some big time problems there in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I think now is where you expect to hear a certain noise that I've heard plenty of on another show that I know a certain producer of ours is probably thinking of making at this point. But if Tom Brady loses this week and to the he's lost 3. What is he lost 3 in a row? That's never happened in his career.
It's 4 out of 5. Yeah.
I don't remember the last time he ever had a stretch like that.
He hadn't lost 3 straight. I think it was in 20 years. That's what I remember. I think it was back in 2002. But
you're right. It might have been 2002 when they were 3-0, but then they lost like a few in a row, and they had that like Super Bowl hangover. Kind of got a little complacent after the underdog upset over the Rams.
And we've mocked and we joked about how the AFC South is the worst division of football. Well, the AFC South has 2 teams at 500 or better. The South now is all under 500 teams. And that's what I'm telling you. The Carolina Panthers all of a sudden now find themselves a game out. And just remember this one thing, too. If we start going to divisional tiebreakers, as of right now, the Panthers are 2-0 in division. Something to keep an eye on there. So the Panthers get past the Bucs, and now the Bucs, who have to win Thursday night.
Was that somebody ringing the doorbell, letting the Bucs know we can come in and beat you?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a bunch of things. I think that might be help for my picks. Here's what you have to do to be better. Look, as I said, this league's just so difficult to figure out. But the Panthers get past the Bucs, and now all of a sudden that Panther-Falcon game next week is actually kind of an important game. It's not the most intriguing slate going into Week 8, but there are some important matchups which we'll get to. Certainly a couple here, and then we'll definitely get to our full Football Friday picks coming up later on in the week. But that's a big win for Carolina. And they're not going to sell. They're only a game out, and maybe we're talking about the NFC South being that situation where it could take 8 or 9 wins, and you never know. I mean, the way this league is, I'm done trying to figure out what it's going to take to win these divisions. But Panthers get a win there. That was good to see, especially coming off the heels of trading McCaffrey away. But they get that win. The Bengals get past the Falcons. I think this was huge for the Bengals' perspective, Hank, because there's been a lot of talk about them struggling, but if you've been watching Joe Burrow play since that opening game where he had those 5 turnovers against the Steelers, he's actually played a lot better. And this was the game where it really looked comfortable. The Falcons, who had been in every game pretty much throughout for the first 6 weeks, laid a dud here as the Bengals win 35-17.
Yeah, I tried giving the Falcons the benefit of the doubt, but this week, probably not the best idea, and it blew up right in my face.
Yeah, and also there we go. The Cowboys get past the Lions 24-6 in Dak's first game back since week 1. And the problem the Lions are running into, it's been a problem they've had for a few weeks now. It's just injuries. And whether it's Swift, whether it's St. Brown, it's not good. They had 8 guys that the Lions did on the injury report as of last Wednesday, and that was coming off their bye week. And they still had several guys in the injury report. And that offense just cannot get going if Swift and Amon-Ra St. Brown are going to both be out. And now he's dealing with concussion in what was a very rough injury day for the NFL on Sunday.
Yeah, I think I'm really starting to regret drinking the Kool-Aid of the Lions before the season. I mean, I thought, oh, Dan Campbell, Hard Knocks.
Hey,
And
I
then,
was on them. That was only the second time in 7 weeks that I picked against them. So I was on, and they had been playing some fun competitive football, but their injuries right now are starting to become way too much to overcome. And now it's back-to-back weeks that they've really struggled on offense. And when your number one receiver and your running back are both out, I mean that takes a lot of life out of the team. Not to mention all the other line injuries that they have on both sides of the football. But the Cowboys now, with Dak being back, go to 5-2, and that's critical as you look at our New York Football Giants, who get a huge win down there in Jacksonville, 23-17.
hmm,
And Hank, so I caught up on this game on Monday when I came back from New York, and I was trying to follow it along on Sunday, but I know the injuries that the Giants had, but once again, Daniel Jones and this Giants offense in the fourth quarter and coming back and, another one score win again just speaks volumes to this team and the coaching staff.
yeah, that one was another good win for the Giants. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna kid myself and tell you it was a pretty win. It was pretty ugly. In fact, I would even argue that it was uglier than probably all the other wins that they've had this season, just because of the way it went down. Because the Giants made this time, unlike most other times, they made a lot of mistakes towards the end, and they got more penalties than the Jaguars. The defense almost let the Jaguars win that game, and not to mention you had Saquon Barkley stepping out of bounds to stop the clock, which really, really could have been a killer because had he stayed in, like the Jaguars probably don't have as much time to win that game. And, we could be talking about a serious letdown here, but, to his credit, Saquon Barkley faced the music. He knew what he did wrong. And he, to a man, admitted that, like, I almost cost the game. I screwed up. He was being accountable. And, once again, Daniel Jones is showing another game where he very well might have a clutch gene that you and I didn't really see the first few years, but the more and more we watch him, it's very obvious that coaching has always been a problem, and he was not in a good system to thrive. And Brian Dable has provided that and then some with the Giants. And gosh, I couldn't be more happier and pleasantly surprised. Now, again, I'm still waiting for the stumbling point to happen. And I actually, if I'm being honest with you, and I'm sorry if I'm like kind of spoiling my pick whatsoever, but like I'm not doing any lines for you. I actually have a feeling we might lose this week in Seattle just because that's a very rough place to play. And the Seahawks have been kind of unpredictable this year. And yeah, unless we talk about the Colt McCoy game that happened a couple years ago, the Giants, for the most part, historically aren't that great playing in Seattle. But if they do, and this is going to sound weird coming from me, that might be a good thing because I want to see how the Giants do coming off of like pressure and see how they can respond to something like this. But we already know this is a pretty gritty team anyway. So I don't know that I'm that worried, but I do have a kind of a weird feeling that you're gonna see a little bit of a slide coming within like maybe not the next few weeks, but like eventually later on in the season. But they're still a much better fundamentally sound team than in years past.
Yeah, it's actually very fortunate they go to Seattle on Sunday and then they have their bye week, which is very, very important. But a couple other things from this game too. You definitely were nervous because the injury to Evan Neal, which fortunately is not as serious as they originally looked. I mean, when I look at my phone and I see Evan Neal carted off the field and then ruled out literally within a span of 2 seconds, of course, first thing you think about without even watching the game is torn ACL. And fortunately, it was not that. Looks like he could be back in 2 to 4 weeks. That's a good thing. But Evan Neal is very, very important on this team. Daniel Bellinger, who we've had high praise for, you and I have spoken about him a lot on this show and on other shows too. Best rookie tight end in the league this year. There's no doubt about it. And unfortunately, he gets an eye injury. Hopefully, he can return soon, but the status on him going forward unknown. A couple of other guys that go out. Who was it? Bellerson also got hurt. So it was kind of a costly win, but it was a big win to get nonetheless. And I love that stop at the end there, the 1 yard line, which I think just goes to show you that once again, this Giant team, in the fourth quarter, it's really amazing. This team in the fourth quarter is unbelievable. In fact, here's a fun stat for you. The Giants are a plus 36 in terms of the scoring differential in the fourth quarter, which is the second best in the league. By comparison, you look at it, the Seahawks, their best quarter is the first, and they're the second best in the NFL in the first quarter. So that could be something to watch. And they're -9 in the fourth. They're plus 30 in the first quarter and a -9 in the fourth. So the start to next Sunday's game up there in Seattle is going to be critical to start and the end. And that's not a favorable place to play. And now you got a Seahawks team that is playing very, very well. We'll see, the injury status for both of these teams going into the weekend before we make our official pick. But, yeah, I've always been nervous going up to Seattle. I know the Giants were able to do it a couple of years ago with McCoy, like you said. But, look, at the end of the day, though, this team finds ways to win. They got a clutch factor. They're getting it on all sides of the ball. It's different players throughout. I mean, it was nice to even see Darius Slayton get involved in the offense, too, on Sunday. Look, they've got it going no matter what. But this is going to be kind of the first test of adversity because outside of the receiving core, Hank, this team for the most part has been relatively healthy. And now you don't have you're probably not going to have Bellinger there. Evan Neal doesn't look like he's going to be there on Sunday. So this is going to be your first test without those guys to see how they do. But nevertheless, 6-1, they continue to amaze people. And of course, once again, going into next week, they are an underdog. This one I think is actually understandably so. But nevertheless, 6-1 is 6-1, and they are definitely one of, if not the best stories in the NFL this year. Titans get past the Colts 19-10. Matt Ryan, I think, is hurt, and he's not playing well. And the news that came out on Monday, which we'll get to about a quarterback change there, but now they go to 3-1, and the Tennessee Titans are 4-2. So all of a sudden now you've got two winning teams in that so-called beleaguered AFC South.
Yeah, I think both of them were pretty flawed, but for me, I think pretty much what happened was what I thought it would come down to, the coaching matchup. Frank Reich, Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel, I think, is definitely the better of the two, and we know who's going to end up losing his job at the end of the season.
You know what's really crazy? You want to hear something crazy about the Colts? They've played 7 games this year, and 5 of them have been in division already. And they're 1-3-1 in divisional matchups. So now so that means they're going to have, one, they play each one twice. So I think they have at least one, maybe 2 more against the AFC South in the next 10 weeks. So if it comes down to divisional tiebreakers, I mean, they're not really going to have a lot of favorability in that regard. So they've got to get things going here, and we'll get to the news regarding their quarterback situation in just a few minutes here. But that's a big win for Tennessee, who now has won both of their divisional matchups in through 7 weeks. So the Titans get a win there. And speaking of sounding the alarm, I think we need to do that about the Green Bay Packers as the Washington Commanders with Taylor Heineke get past Green Bay 23-21. Look, there's a lot of problems with Green Bay, and now it doesn't help that Allen Lazard's hurt again. Green Bay now 3 losses in a row, very, very rare for them with Aaron Rodgers, and it's kind of some historical aspects as Rodgers is going to be a double-digit underdog for the first time going into the Sunday nighter next Sunday. But, Hank, Packers got a lot of problems now. They're 2.5 games out in the division, really 3 because they don't own the tiebreaker right now against Minnesota. I don't know if it's the lack of depth on offense, whether it's the lines, whether it's Aaron Rodgers maybe not being healthy, a combination of all that, but a lot of problems here for Green Bay.
Well, all of them certainly have to go hand in hand, but because we pretty much knew it was a flawed Packers team compared to those in years past, but with them losing like that the way they did against the Commanders, I don't think anybody in the state of Wisconsin is going to be RELAXing at this point in time. Yeah, sorry, Nick. I had to steal another aspect from the not steal your thunder there.
Wow. But yeah, it's definitely not a time to relax there in Green Bay. That's for sure. But yeah, so Washington wins. That's 2 in a row for them. As they get past Green Bay, obviously they're doing that right now with Heineke, as Carson Wentz is going to be out next 4 to 6 weeks following his surgery. Jets get past the Broncos 16-9. Jets are now 5-2. It was kind of a costly win for them, but first of all, from the Broncos' perspective, they fall to 2-5. Offense just continues to look lifeless. Defense keeps them in games, but the offense is lifeless. Russell Wilson did not play in this game with the hamstring injury, so it was Brett Rippon under center, and he wasn't ripping it there. And they're dealing with the possibility now that this could be a bigger, more significant injury with Wilson. I mean, there's been reports that maybe it's a torn hamstring, in fact, and the Broncos now go to London to take on the London Jaguars. I mean, the Jacksonville Jaguars, even though it should be the London Jaguars, but I digress. The Jaguars next week. Big problems there for the Broncos. But from the Jets side of things, another big win for them, a game that Zach Wilson really doesn't have to do much in, but it was a costly one too because they suffered a couple of big injuries. Their offensive talent, Elijah Vera Tucker, out for the season. And, of course, the big one, Breece Hall, the great young running back who I've had high praise for. I've been mentioning his name a lot on this show and on the picks. Torn ACL. He goes out for the season. But, for the Jet fan here, I want to try and keep everybody calm in saying this. Look, these are not the same old Jets because they did win the game. They're 5-2. Yes, they suffered a couple of injuries. Look, every team's going to have them. But look what they do afterwards. Then 24 hours later, they go out there and make a trade for James Robinson from the Jaguars. These are different. These are different Jets. You know what? And they get it done again, and they're 5-2.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. I think the Jets are definitely another team that has been really showing you that they might act, that you can't just look at them at their schedule and think, oh, this is an easy win. The Jets definitely have heart. And again, I think now I'm starting to think maybe Robert Saleh is not so crazy for wanting to take names for all those believers. Heck, if he watches this show, I think you and I might be among some of those names, and even a certain member of his own fan base. Again, Nick, no offense. I'm sorry if I keep taking shots at you. This is all in good fun, brother. But
I think he'll be happy at 5-2, man. I know he wanted them to go 0-17, but look, they're 5-2, and they're going to have a good test coming up here. But look, take 5-2. I think they have a chance to make a very bold statement. They go out there, beat the Patriots at home on Sunday, and you know what? Prove my theory that the Patriots are the worst team in the AFC East. That'd be the thing to do. And again, you know what? Every team's going to go through adversity, going to go through challenging times. Breece Hall not being there stinks. They are still a very, very good team. And you go up against a Patriots team next week that we don't know what their quarterback situation is. I mean, this is as good as it can be for the Jets going into week number 8. But they get the win there at Mile High. I think they did what they needed to do, even if it wasn't pretty. But you know what? You got the win. That's all you need to do. Take that win, move on. That's what you do. Raiders get past the Texans 38-20. Both teams came off their bye week. I thought the Texans could keep it close. This was kind of my upset special. I actually really thought the Texans could give the Raiders a run, but not to be, as the Raiders offense now has gotten it going 3 games in a row here. And they have to get it going if they want to challenge this AFC West with the Chargers and the Chiefs. And Hank, speaking of the Chargers, not a good day for them on Sunday, as the Seahawks just totally destroyed them 37-23, and really more bad news on the injury front, as J.C. Jackson and Mike Williams were both hurt. And this is a very big deal now. These guys are going to be out for any length of time to go along with Bosa and Keenan Allen, who has been struggling to stay on the field. And we all know about Justin Herbert, who's been battling through some rib trouble too. This is a big problem for the Chargers if these guys are going to be missing any length of time.
Yeah, I think the Chargers are in very deep trouble. I mean, they could ill afford to lose one of those big games, especially because you have the Chiefs in their division. The Chiefs aren't going away anytime soon.
No, and speaking of them, 44-23 against that 49ers defense that I mentioned on Friday during the football pick segment, that that their defense was dealing with some holes. I know the Chiefs defense hasn't been good either, but I mean, that 49ers defense was down some guys, and Christian McCaffrey, very hard for him to make a big impact when he got traded just a couple of days before. But a bold game for Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs as they go to 5-2, and now with the Charger woes, might actually have a chance to put a little bit of separation here in the early going as they win 44-23. Sunday Night Football, Dolphins get past the Steelers 16-10. The return of Tua Tagovailoa there for the Dolphins, and definitely looked good in some moments. I mean, he scared you to death when he couldn't slide on that one play, but there's definitely a difference, though, when he's there with that offense through Tua than it is, say, through a Skylar Thompson or a Teddy Bridgewater. So that was a big win there for the Dolphins to go to 4-3 and end their losing streak.
Yeah, and the Steelers are just looking more and more flawed by the week that I watch them. And Kenny Pickett, oh boy, that starts pretty rough.
Yeah, not a good spot there. I know that they've been banged up defensively too, and they fall to 2-5. A big win for the Dolphins. They go to 4-3. And then speaking of a mess, how about this Monday night game? The Bears 33-14 over the New England Patriots. So first of all, who had the Bears scoring 33 points? Put your hand up if you had them going 33 points. All right, put it down. You're lying. So your Thunder stealing. Nick's Thunder. Spread the wealth around. I sure did not have the Bears scoring 33 points. I sure did not have the Bears winning this game. But Justin Fields actually did all right. He doesn't have to throw much. He did it on the ground. Bears did it with their defense. Patriots are the one time I actually decided to pick them. I told them I said that they're a mess. You know what? I fell into the trap. The last 2 weeks they've been playing all right, but an absolute total mess there. And now we don't know what their quarterback situation is going to be going into Week 8 Sunday against the Jets. And I'm sure Bill Belichick's not going to give you any clues. He's probably going to keep it mysterious as well to try and game plan against the Jets here on Sunday. But now all of a sudden the Bears, they are 3-4, and they could be making a kind of an interesting move here if the Packers are going to continue to struggle.
I mean, look, let's be honest with ourselves. We knew the Patriots going into the season were not a good team, and I think we all agreed that they were the worst team in the AFC East. And this is probably the first time I've ever been able to say that about the Patriots, because I don't remember the first year of the Bill Belichick era in 2000. And, going into this game, now they have a whole quarterback controversy, and that approach that they took, I've never seen a worse approach than the one that they took. Go with regards to the quarterback. You're going to start Mac Jones, and then all of a sudden, who probably shouldn't have even started that game to begin with, if I'm being honest. And then you go right to Bailey Zapp not too long after that. I mean, that's about as bad as Lloyd Carr with Michigan when he decided, let's alternate between Drew Henson and some guy. You may have heard of him. His name is Tom Brady.
Yeah, I've heard of him, and I've heard of Drew Henson too. We know about.
Wonder whatever came of that, man.
You know what? Yeah, I mean, we saw him for a cup of coffee there in the Bronx. In college football, though, you can.
Oh no, I meant Tom Brady, but yeah, I do remember.
Oh yeah. No, yeah, Brady turned out to be a pretty good quarterback in the league. But Hank, you can get by with that system in college. You can't do it in the NFL. We've seen teams these last couple of years try and do it. I think the Saints actually have been all right in trying to do it, but at the same time, they're doing it with a guy in Taysom Hill who can actually play multiple positions. But I think the Jets tried to do that one time with Tebow. That didn't work. And you also didn't have the personnel either. But
the Jets, we already know that was a failed experiment.
Yeah, well, the Tim Tebow trade, not just harking on it, but we knew the
only other bad quarterback controversy where handling was probably early in the 71 season when Tom Landry tried to literally alternate Craig Morton and Roger Staubach between.
It doesn't work in the NFL. Again, you can do it in college, but you can't do it in the pros. It just doesn't work. But yeah, we all know that Tim Tebow trade was not for football purposes. But you just can't run that 2-quarterback system in the league. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Bill Belichick. I don't care if you're Rex Ryan. I don't care if you're Sean Payton. It just doesn't work for a reason. But because the old saying goes, when you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks, Hank. That's what it is. And now that's the thing too. You take out of this New England game. I think the Pats were struggling, and Mac Jones was actually a positive for them before he got hurt. And then Bailey Zappi was doing great too. And yet they still weren't getting it done. Now they're not getting it done with bad quarterback play. Those are the red alarms. That's the red herring there. That's the big problem in New England right now. And I would imagine that Belichick's going to be very quiet this week going into the Sunday night game against the Jets about whose quarterback's going to be. So he's going to try and throw off the Jets, realizing that actually they are better than the Jets are. And as of now, I don't know why the heck New England's even favored in that game on Sunday. And we'll see what it's like when we do our picks come Friday. But yeah, that just wraps up what was a very, very wacky week 7 in the NFL. By the way, in terms of our picks, folks, another bad week for me. I went 6-8, and Hank went 8-6. And so through 7 weeks of the season, Hank and I are both the NFC South, not the AFC South. The AFC South actually is 500 teams. We are both the NFC South at 47, 58, and 3. Woof. But it's just been that kind of year. You know what? And we'll find out. Of course, our official Football Friday picks drop every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. We will make our first official pick for Week 8. And that's crazy to say already, Week 8 in the NFL coming up here in a couple of minutes. 2 storylines, though, Hank, as we go into Week 8. I mean, there's a bunch of them. I mean, one thing you took out of Week 7, just some of these injuries that came out. I mean, I'll read you some of these names here. Breece Hall, DK Metcalf, J.C. Jackson, Mike Williams, Ryan Tannehill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Evan Neal, A.J. Terrell, David Njoku, Alan Lazard, Elijah Vera Tucker, Trey Henderson. I mean, some big names there. And we also know from our Giants side of things, we spoke about Neal, but also, Bellinger, big loss there for the Giants, and we'll see how they are able to respond going into this game on Sunday. But some other headlines that came out of this week. How about in the Colts-Commanders game on Sunday, the Colts going to Sam Ehlinger, the former quarterback of Texas, to make his first start at QB for Matt Ryan. That Matt Ryan experiment not working. He's hurt. And one thing about this, though, if you heard Frank Reich's press conference on Monday, they think this could be for the entire rest of the season. So Nick Foles is also on this roster, but they are going to Ehlinger to start not only possibly this week, but for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, that's a situation that's a real mess for the Indianapolis Colts, and good Lord, I can't believe I predicted that team to win the division. Like, I knew that they were flawed going in, but I just saw them as like the best of the worst. And now you're going with a backup quarterback who very well might do well, because I don't think Washington really has film on them, and they might not be able to like defend him, and that often happens with quarterbacks who make their debuts. But it's just,
I thought this was a very interesting choice, especially when you have the veteran Foles on the team. But Ehlinger, they did draft.
Very strange.
But I'll say this, though, too, and while the Colts still have a chance to win this division, because you never know with this whole AFC South, but they've already played 5 games in this division. Frank Reich realizes that, his name has been talked about on the hot seat for a few weeks now. I think he's trying to see if he can hit lightning in a bottle here with Ehlinger, and we'll see. But yeah, like you said, we don't really have much history on him because we haven't really seen him play. And I mean, he was right down there in Texas, but yeah, kind of an interesting choice here. And I know Matt Ryan's hurt, and by the way, yeah, he's been a big disappointment. But the other problem that the Colts have had though this year is Jonathan Taylor has just not been the same running back from last year. He's been hurt. He's had some ankle problems, but he has not been the explosive guy that they thought they were going to get to maybe take some of the pressure off of Matt Ryan. But Ehlinger there under center to start in week number 8. And this was another one that we did bring up earlier on in the show with the New York Football Jets, who did go out there on Monday night, acquired James Robinson from the Jaguars for a conditional pick. And this was in light of the news of Breece Hall, their great young running back, tearing his ACL in Denver and being ruled out for the season. And look, you gotta love what the Jets are doing here, because you could have just gone on the air and say that, oh, this is the same old Jets. Well, it's not, because they go out there and they get a good replacement, James Robinson, who had really fallen off the radar for the Jaguars with who they had there. Obviously, Travis Etienne returning from his injury last year, and he had really like no production down there in Jacksonville. So I love what the Jets are doing, because this wasn't like the home run move, but it was a solid pickup to go replace Breece Hall. It was just for a conditional pick.
Oh, definitely. I think the Jets made a smart decision. They didn't even have to get rid of too much, so I definitely think they definitely lucked out with that move. And hey, again, 5-2. And by the way, you want to know a fun fact?
Sure.
About the Jets. I believe that win with over Denver, I believe, was their first win in the Mile High since I want to say 2010. It might have been during the failed Josh McDaniels experiment with the Denver Broncos. And gee, at LA, I wonder if you've learned that lesson. Or not LA, Las Vegas, sorry.
Yep.
And then I also heard that I believe this is also the first time since 2010. So I think the Jets started 4-0 on the road too.
Yes, I believe that is correct. Yeah.
Because let's see, they beat Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Denver. Who am I missing?
Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Denver. What are we? Let's see here. I'm gonna kick myself when I.
Because I know that their losses were at home to Baltimore and oh crap, why am I forgetting the other one?
Well, nevertheless, 4-0 on the road there. And
the Pittsburgh and Cleveland ones especially were shocking. The Dolphins,
that's right. Yep. How could we forget that? There we go.
I thought the Dolphins was a home game, but I could be wrong.
No, it was down. Hold on a second here. We're gonna clarify this right now.
I am gonna look at the schedule too. And
Pittsburgh. All right, so here it was. Obviously,
Green Bay. How could I'm a goofball? How could I forget that?
We got so much on our minds.
Green Bay at Lambeau.
Yeah, but yeah. So we'll see what this does for the Jets there on Sunday. All right, let's get to the start of Week 8 here, which gets going on Thursday night. So Thursday night football, and kind of an interesting matchup after what's been a kind of ugly matchups these last couple of weeks here. The Baltimore Ravens travel to Tampa Bay to take on Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. And the Bucs, who have lost 4 out of 5, and again, this is Vegas. It's so weird. So the Bucs losers are 4 to 5, looking completely off these last several weeks. They are a 1.5 point favorite at home against the Ravens.
So imagine telling me that one of the big games, a lot of the big games we expected wouldn't be featuring two teams that are over 500. But you want to know a game that is featuring two games above 500? The Giants versus the Seahawks. But back to this game, Buccaneers are favored by 1.5. I don't know who to trust in this game. See, the Buccaneers have become more flawed than I realized. I mean, it's looking more and more obvious that maybe Bruce Arians leaving wasn't necessarily a good thing. So tough call. I'm going to go with the Ravens. I can't believe I'm betting against Tom Brady to keep losing, but here we are.
So obviously we know both teams having a short week. I mean, gosh, the weird thing is just Baltimore's defense just scares me in the fact that, they're one of those teams that we talked about just has not been able to close out games.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. I've gone to Tampa Bay's well 3 weeks in a row, and they were laying huge numbers, and it did not work out. The game at home against Atlanta didn't cover. Probably shouldn't have won, but nevertheless, they won that game, but did not cover. The game at Pittsburgh laid a big number. Not only did they not cover, they lost. And then obviously the game last week at Carolina, they were laying 13. Not only did they not cover, they did not win that one. I have to trust the team that's more sound at this point, and that is the Baltimore Ravens. So even if the Bucs win by a point, it's good enough. Yeah. So you're taking the Ravens. I think you and I are in agreement here. I'm taking Baltimore. And let's say, just for the heck of it, let's say something like 20. You know what? I could see something like 24-17 Baltimore in this spot. Bucs just have too many problems, and it's going to take them time to correct this. In a short week, probably not the answer for them. So Baltimore to win 24-17 over the Bucs to start week number 8. And of course, a reminder, folks, our full slate of Football Friday picks can be found every Friday here on Game On our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube channel at ETB Network there on YouTube. Well, Hank, we've got one more storyline to talk about before we wrap up the show, and this was an interesting one coming out of the NBA. You know, the NBA has been we've used the word tanking a lot here in sports, but the NBA seems to have always had a big problem with this. And Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, says that the NBA is monitoring a serious tanking issue. And what this stems from is that there is a huge, big-time prospect that is expected to go in the draft next season. And he's talking about teams that could be tanking to go get him. But here's the thing I would say about this, because there have been reports saying that, you know, how could you punish teams for tanking? First of all, how do you know teams are tanking? If you're bad, you're bad. I don't like to believe the fact that teams are about the tanking issue. But nevertheless, here they were talking about possibly demoting these NBA teams. Now, here's what I would do to correct this so-called tanking issue. I think you have to talk about the lottery, because I think what you can do is change the percentage of the teams in the lottery with their ping pong ball percentage. And what I mean by that is, you know, if you are the team with the worst record, let's say you have this percent to get the number one overall pick, I think you should drop it. I think these percentages should drop a little bit, and some of the bottom teams, like your 9th, 10th, 11th worst teams, should get a little bit of a bump up, and not make it that big of a difference to increase your chances, to decrease your chances somewhat of getting to get that ping pong ball and get the number one overall pick. Because what are you really going to do? So Silver had brought these comments up to Phoenix Sun employees. He addressed possible solutions for tanking while noting that he understands why teams would do it when a, quote, one-generational player is about to enter the league. This was according to sources. And this has to do with, let me see if I can get this guy's name right. I know I have a tough time pronouncing it, but while I try and practice announcing it. Okay, so here it is. It has to do with a 7'4" French phenom, Victor Wembanyama, who they're calling a potentially franchise-altering prospect being projected to be the number one overall pick in the 2023 draft. So, yeah, I heard about this. They are actually comparing him this much hype to LeBron back in 2003. But, Hank, I don't really know how you could change how you can really change anything. With really the easiest thing to do is to change the percentages in the NBA lottery.
Yeah, I don't know. Teams are going to tank. That's their right. But I also get where he's coming from, and that like a team tanking just really isn't good. And like most fans want to see them try. So I don't know. I guess I get where he's coming from. But like the idea that you're going to tank even with like a lottery system, that's not going to fully guarantee a number one.
So a couple of things with this. So he was speaking of a concept in European soccer. So Silver told employees that the league has thought about relegation as a potential solution to ensure the worst performing teams are incentivized to compete. But the commissioner then said really relegation would be, quote, destabilizing to the NBA. I don't think you can do that. What do you mean? You demote one or two teams to the G League while promoting the best of two from the G League to the NBA? That's not realistic. Now, the NBA has actually flattened the draft lottery odds, which is something I was just talking to. In 2019, they flattened the odds. So now teams with the three worst regular season records each have a 14% chance of winning the lottery. Before that, the teams with the worst record had a 25% chance. The second worst, 19.9%, and the third worst, 15.6%. But Silver still believes that tanking remains an issue this season. I don't really know what else you could do. That relegation strategy, what they do in European soccer, is not realistic. And especially in this day and age, with money being the way that it is, I just don't think this is a realistic thing. I think the only other thing you can do is continue to flatten the odds in the NBA, unless you're going to take sanctions against the organization. But again, how are you going to actually go out there and prove that somebody's tanking in order to do sanctions, where you either take away somebody's draft pick or money. I don't really know if there's anything you really can do outside of flattening the odds even more.
Yeah, no, I definitely would agree. If the
Like
Lakers,
I'll give you an example here because this is a team that I said is not going to be good this year, and that's the Lakers. Can you imagine just for a second if the Lakers end up being one of the worst teams in the league, and you're going to say that you're going to send those guys to the G League? Think of somebody like LeBron. Can you imagine like coming on our airways and telling me that the Lakers and LeBron went to the G League? That's not realistic.
no, that's ridiculous.
And I don't think you can, use sanctions against organization for something like this. You say something like that for, criminal acts or something, that's far more serious than say quote unquote tanking issue. I think the lottery, which I know people are not a fan of, I actually am a fan of it because I think it does prevent against tanking because it does increase. It supposedly increases your odds, but it doesn't guarantee you getting the number one overall pick. I think there should be a lottery in all these sports, to be honest with you, because that would prevent much against tanking. I mean, I truly believe, though, in a lot of these sports, if you're not good, you're not good.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you can, go out. I think the only way you can prove tanking is if you go out there and your best players are not starting, like, say, they come off the bench and you come up with an entirely different lineup, then maybe you can address it. But the NBA is trying to monitor. They think that this is a serious issue. It's been talked about a lot. And it's really being brought up this year because of this whole Victor Wembanyama, which is a name you're going to hear about a lot this year because he is expected to be the number one overall pick in 2023. Fortunately or unfortunately, my Knicks will not have to worry about that because I think they're going to be too good of a team this year to be in that draft conversation. But that's something to think about too. So you're going to really demote teams to the G League and promote teams from the G League. Let me tell you, you want to promote teams to the G League, you're going to be getting a lot more 140 to 60 kind of games. Is that something you want to? I don't think so. But an interesting thing that's still over brought up here, as the NBA is going to go through a very interesting time here with their CBA potentially being up here and the issues that are starting to flare up with this league. And this is just another one that's going to be left on top of it. But we'll find out what happens here with the NBA. But, Hank, certainly a lot of stuff going on. So let me just give you our schedule here for this week, folks. We've got, of course, our Monty Moment coming up on Thursday, every Thursday on college football. And one of the big topics we're going to talk about this week on the Monty Moment is Clemson really a top 4 team? They had to go to a backup. DJ got pulled. They were able to come back, just barely beat Syracuse. But are they really a top 4 team when you look at how the SEC is, when you look at how potentially the Big Ten is, or other teams in the ACC? We're going to tackle that topic as well as give you 3 more picks against the spread. We're starting to actually heat up a little bit in college football more so than the NFL. I went 2-1 again in my picks last week, so we're 5-1 over the last 2, so we're starting to heat up there. So that Monty Moment on the Clemson situation and all of college football is going to drop on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, our Football Friday picks against the spread every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, also right here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. And, of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get and ring that notification bell so you know when our content is going to be on. And, of course, Empty the Bench, Beyond the Bench, Fruity Cereal, the MMA Outsiders, all those kind of shows going to be on. So a lot of stuff upcoming here as we wrap up the month. And, of course, the guys over there at Empty the Bench, they got a huge thing coming up next Monday, the 31st on Halloween, with another live stream of Monday Night Football between the Browns and the Bengals. So be around for that. That's going to drop next Monday. I know the guys are going to talk about that, of course, on their next episode of Empty the Bench on Wednesday. So much happening as we wrap up the month. So, Hank, thanks again. This was fun. And, again, another busy show as always.
Always a pleasure, Johnny, and can't wait to be back at it again next week and looking forward to talking some picks.
Absolutely. So for Hank Indictor, I'm Johnny Montalbano. We'll catch you later on in the week. And then for episode 31 of the show next week.